It's harder juggling family and a child than it is running a business. There's a lot of guilt for myself being a business owner, but also trying to be a father at the same time. I remember very vividly, my wife actually said to me, and this was 10 months ago, she said, sometimes I feel like you're here, but you're not here. She basically was like, well, just because you're physically here, she could see my mind was like drifting into other places. Damn, like I really actually need to do something about this.
On today's episode of the All Business Baby podcast, I am speaking to Kan Huang from Social Wave.
I use the metaphor of farmer. You run like a plantation. If you only planted a dozen seeds, what the hell do you think is going to happen? Like you might harvest like one or two plants out of it. You're not going to get much out of it. And what I had to learn was it's the orders of magnitude of how much you do, not what you do. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the most intelligent guy, but a bit like Kobe Bryant, you just turn up and you just shoot hoops all day. If I shoot more buckets than anyone else, I believe I'm going to do better. No one tells you that sort of stuff.
Kan, welcome to the All Business Baby podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. So to start off, if people don't already know you, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I run a marketing agency called Social Wave. I've been doing that for the last 5 years. And in a previous life, did about a decade in hotel management, which was like completely different. But then more recently, in the last 2 years, I've launched a podcast called Level Asian. So very familiar with this setting. And it's a podcast that's mainly about celebrating and supporting Asian Australians. And, I'm sure we'll get into it in a second, but that's what takes up most of my time.
Awesome. No, you're doing a really good job. And I'm sure a lot of people can recognize you because you're a social media influencer now. So
that's a good and a bad thing, though.
No, that's good. All right. Well, look, let's touch on Social Wave. So, prior to Social Wave, what were you doing before then? And then what led you to then go, you know what, I'm going to start Social Wave or let me start a business?
Yeah, like Social Wave, I would say is probably the most, like the first really successful business venture that I ever did. Like I always wanted to do entrepreneurship. So throughout my 20s, and obviously a mutual friend and contact of ours, Davey Mack as well, runs his own accounting firm, as you know. We used to, because we're high school mates, we talk about like all these business ideas. And I remember there's one stupid idea we had. Those protein shaker bottles?
Yes.
And like we thought that you could press this button and it would dispense it, whereas people used to pack like their protein powder like separately. And we thought that was like the bee's knees. It was like the most innovative thing. Anyway, never got off the ground. We even went to China, the Canton Fair, to like look for like manufacturers. But we just didn't know what we were doing, basically, young kids. And this was like before the internet got the way it is now with entrepreneurship. Yes. So anyway, to cut a long story short, always wanted to do a whole bunch of different entrepreneurial stuff. Never had the expertise or know-how or probably the mindset for it. And it wasn't until I backed myself into a corner with this agency. And, some people probably heard this story, but I sort of quit my career as a hotelier and then I went traveling for a year. And this was the year before COVID hit. And a year in, COVID hit. I remember I was in Thailand in an Airbnb in Bangkok with my girlfriend, now wife. Yeah. And ScoMo was on TV and he's like, every Australian needs to come out. I remember that day very vividly. Yeah. And I was like, fuck, do I like stay and possibly never not get back into the country for a while? And as we know now in history, like heaps of people got stuck.
Yes.
Or do we make the call early and we come back home? And we thought the safer thing was probably to come back, see what happens, because obviously this was something that was never happened in the world before.
Ever. Yeah.
And got myself into Airbnb quarantine, self-imposed. This was before the hotel ones. And I had a few $1,000s in my bank account because I drained it all from traveling. What a privilege. And then decided that, it was either go back to an industry that was falling apart, which was hotels because of travel being stopped, or move into something different. And, whilst I was traveling, I was doing some marketing and consulting and things like that. Davey was like, well, let's just double down. And, we really blew up his business during that time doing marketing. It was just me and him running gun along with Noel, who's my business partner now. And so to cut a long story short, fast forward, 4 or 5 years and, a big team of 30, 35 onshore, offshore, doing a lot of content for clients, including yourself, which is why we're sitting here.
Thank you.
And and I guess the rest is history.
It's been a journey to see actually your progress, because I remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago, actually we were in this office, but maybe on the other side.
Yeah.
Davey introduced me to you and mentioned that you were starting this Social Wave thing, and it's come a long way since. But, before we get into that journey, I want to touch on a little bit about yourself. So you were working in hotels.
Correct.
Did you have any marketing experience at all?
No formal training, never worked in an agency, never had a marketing role. But I ran hotels, I ran operations.
So then why marketing? Right. Why social wave?
So, I mean, as everyone, like, you know, big marketer, Gary Vee was like a massive guy, you know, like I probably don't consume as much of him now, but in the early days, he was really, I guess, critical to, he was very refreshing because he sort of was telling you things that you probably didn't like to hear, but you needed to hear, and sort of almost like by proxy, like a mentor-like figure. And I know a lot of people find him annoying, but actually, you know, he cut through that bullshit and he's actually not bad. Marketing is an interesting one because it doesn't require you to have formal qualifications. It requires you to get your hands dirty. And I was just someone who was happy to just go in there. And I think given the amount of time I had after quitting my hotel and taking that 1 year gap, I had a lot of time to actually deploy and test things out. And so I probably learned more in that 12 months of doing marketing than I did if I had worked full time or something like that. And so I got really good at it. And one of the key things that I learned as a result of this is like people go, chase your passion. And I was like, no, you actually get really passionate about getting really good at something instead of looking for something passionate and then getting good at it. And so that order reversed and really helped me. And so it could have been marketing, or it is marketing, but it could have been anything. It could have, I don't know, it could have been crochet or something. Like, I got really good at it. I would have been really passionate about it. So to answer your question, I think that, you know, marketing is also something it's just logical. I'm a very logical thinker. And so if it doesn't make sense to people, it won't make sense to me. And that's why it works well for me.
Yeah. Wow. Now, the reason why I asked is because, you know, I've seen the journey from day one almost to where it is now. And obviously in that 5 year time frame, it's blown up, right? So my thought, well, I was just thinking, holy shit, Kan's been a marketing for like the last 20 years, but here he is, you just decided, okay, one day I'm going to do marketing, and you've obviously, the main thing is if you really focused on it, you really put all the time and effort into it, and now this is, you know, the fruits of your labor, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think there's such a thing as velocity of effort when it comes to doing anything. But, you know, if we use it in the context of business, if you put in the effort, and we're talking like day in, day out, the reps, and, you know, you use the gym analogy or the personal training analogy. It's like you can't just show up to the gym one day and get a six pack. I still don't have a six pack. But you got to turn up every single day. And so I could probably attribute that I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the most intelligent guy, but, you know, a bit like Kobe Bryant, like, you know, you just turn up and you just shoot hoops all day. If I shoot more buckets than anyone else, I believe I'm going to do better. And so I think the way I've been instilled this, and maybe it's a byproduct of my parents and not just seeing how they do it, but also what they've taught me. One of the things they said to me, and there's maybe a migrant aspect, is you might not be able to outsmart people, but you are able to outwork people. Yeah. And so I just outworked everyone, in my opinion. But also it's funny because during that period of time growing up, I didn't have a reference point because I had no marketing background. I didn't know if I was growing quickly, slowly, or whatever. I was fortunate I had someone in the office like Davey, and then obviously, you know, people like yourself coming in the office every now and again going, hey man, you guys are growing really fast. I'm like, oh really? You don't know. You can't tell unless you talk to people. Yeah.
No, that's really good and insightful. I guess it really do anything if you put your mind to it, right?
100%.
Yeah. Let's go back to the first year. So the first year you've jumped into business, you kind of maybe a reindeer in headlights. What were the challenges you experienced in the first year? How did you overcome that?
Yeah, first year was very challenging in different ways, probably to what I hear most people talk about. A lot of it was like psychologically challenging for me, very emotionally challenging. And the reason for that was because at that time, we literally got back, I think it was like the second week of getting back from overseas, and we found out that my mother-in-law had cancer. So she was stage 4 melanoma. She was in pretty bad shape. And so here we are, sort of no assets to our name, nothing. It was an internal drive to make it possible to, you know, support her. I think the second reason also is because, you know, again, just coming back with absolutely nothing, you had to basically, you know, grow the business. The challenge that I had was really just around, like, I guess, imposter syndrome, you know, being someone who hadn't had any formal training. I spent a lot of time, and I remember like the language I was using was really like, oh, if this doesn't work out or when this fails. It was like, you know, people call it now like things like affirmations and manifestation. I still don't know what it is, but I feel like I somewhat did it. And I remember Davey calling me out, and he was like saying, why are you always talking about your business when it sort of goes down instead of like the opposite? And that was because you would go through, and no one teaches this stuff, you go through patches of business where it's like, it's really great. You know, when it rains, it pours, you get a lot of clients coming through, and then you go through like droughts. And I remember there was a drought sort of at the back end of the year. This was the first year of business. And I'm going, man, I'm getting like all these inquiries, but I can't close anyone. And I was like, I was ready to like throw my hat in the, like throw the towel in the ring and give up. Yeah, because you were like, maybe I'm not good enough, and all that self-talk. And then January comes around after Christmas, and we picked up like 4 or 5 clients, including one of our biggest clients back then, but still is one of our big clients today. And that was a big lesson for me, going, hey, like, you in the first year or two, it's all about just staying like alive and keeping your head above the water, because something magical happens after that, where, you know, you build a reputation, people become aware of you, and that's when you start to see things snowball a little bit. And so to answer your question, the first year was very challenging psychologically, even though you're doing the right things. Yeah. You know, there's some stuff outside of your control.
Well, I think you guys, like, I had a similar type of experience my first year. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs, but the first year is really about planting seeds, right? And you've mentioned that, you know, the second year started to snowball. That's right. Like for me, I got out there, I said, this is what I'm doing. I was yelling, you know, across the room, not literally, but figuratively, hey, this is what I do. And so the first year, there were times where I was just playing with my thumb and just going, shit, when is the next person coming in? When's the next lead coming through? Yeah. Or there are times where I'm just absolutely busy because, you know, there's only me. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs, but come the second year, man, things just started going really well. And at that point in time, there was not a day where I was not busy anymore. And that's really the fact that I think there was a bit of marketing involved, but also just the awareness now that people know that you're doing this full time. Because when you are doing things half-assed, or, you know, part-time, whatever it may be, people aren't going to really know what you're doing until you actually do it full-time. Right?
100%. I use the metaphor of it's like you're a farmer. You run like a plantation, and if you only planted like a dozen seeds, what the hell do you think is going to happen? Like, you might harvest like 1 or 2 plants out of it. Yeah. You're not going to get much out of it. And so sometimes and what I had to learn was, it's the orders of magnitude of how much you do, not what you do. Because most of the time the advice is there. Like, what you do is correct. Like, go out there, you network, you do marketing, you contact people, you do sales and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, until someone actually, like, I remember someone said to me, they were like, oh, well, like, how many people are you sort of meeting every day? And what are like your numbers, right? I would say, oh, you know, I met 3 or 4 people this week. And they're like, well, you need to do like 30, 40, or 300, 400. I'm like, what? Right? Yeah. And it's like these sort of orders of magnitude is really important, because, again, going back to the metaphor, if you go and plant 300-400 seeds, not every seed's going to lead to something you can harvest, but you're going to give yourself a better probability of chance. And I think a lot of new business owners I didn't understand it. New business owners don't understand this, is because they come in and they think they can be a little bit more passive, especially because of, you know, I'm in digital marketing. You just sit there and do a few videos here and there, and all of a sudden, you know, the leads come rolling. It's going to work, right? Like, if you build, they'll come. And I was like, I even tell clients now, I was like, you can't, if you build, they'll come. You have to actively like market. You still have to go and do the hard yards.
You have to do a lot of other things, and so it compounds.
100%. And that's the thing that, you know, I probably learned the most in the first year or so, because no one tells you that sort of stuff.
That's exactly right. I think it's from experience as well. So I guess during that whole time growing your business, did you get any help, or was it all just kind of learn? You kind of just like a trial and error. This worked, this didn't work, and then you learned from that.
Yeah.
How did that growth happen?
Look, I have to give credit to someone like Davey, who I think I didn't realize the value that I had of just someone else who's a little bit further. He was, you know, 3 or 4 years ahead of me at the time, being in the same office, because he would see things play out, and then we would have conversations, you know, over lunch, or we'd catch up, and then he would say things based on his personal experience, or, you know, even because he's an accountant, you know, too, it's like you just have this big sample size of different circumstances of things playing out. And so you kind of have that insight. And I was really lucky to be the recipient on the end of a lot of those insights and advice. But I also had like mentors, and when I say mentors, it's not like I've had the same person the whole time. I would have people who served a particular purpose for me at a certain point in time. So I would get people who I knew that I respected, who were doing what I wanted to do, and I would then have catch-ups and regular meetings, or if I had a particular problem, I'd reach out to them. But I also invested in like a couple of business coaches. Didn't quite work out the way I would have liked to, just partly because I didn't feel like the business coaches were adding as much value to me. But it was possible that maybe I was just further along at that point. And had I got it earlier, then I probably would have received a lot more value out of them as well. Yeah. So it's timing, I think, I guess, with this stuff.
No, that's good. Good to know. Now, you're in the 4th, 5th year in business now. What would you say is the difference between now versus your first couple of years? Like, what are the challenges or the challenges you're experiencing now compared to the first year?
First couple of years in business really is about foundations. It's just establishing yourself, getting the name out there. I think it's more around I guess maybe survivorship in certain ways as well. You want to make sure that you're generally profitable, the cash flow's right, you're not paying too much taxes.
Food on the table.
Food on the table, and a lot of it is you're getting your hands dirty yourself in the first couple of years. And then, sort of and I remember very vividly, like year 2 to year 3, we had this sort of big growth. We had a lot of clients come on board, and it sort of started to expand beyond the capacity of just myself and Noel at the time, and needing to actually build a team. And so you go from, I guess being technician to then becoming, boss or manager and business owner.
Yes.
And, as they say, they're like, well, if you're just doing the work, then, it's just a really well-paid or high-paid job. When you're running a business, you're running a team, you're running businesses and processes. So like 3rd and 4th year now is really around, sort of growth, looking at opportunities. We've got more cash to sort of, and capital to inject into continuing and fostering that growth. Yeah. And also just actually fundamentally sustaining that growth as well. Because, if you take your foot off the pedal, as so for example, marketing, then, you get forgotten very quickly as well. And so,
turn off the tap.
Exactly. So that's kind of the focus now, moving even into year 5 now, where we're really also just like making sure that we are clear about who we serve, because in the first couple of years, you just work with anyone and everyone.
You got a heartbeat, I'll take you.
Exactly, right? You got some cash and a heartbeat, I'll take you. That's my criteria. But we're a little bit more specific and a little bit more careful about who we work with. And we also qualify the people that we work with as well. Because of course, you've got finite resources. I run a professional services business, you do too. Not so easy to scale compared to maybe a tech company or e-commerce as well.
Yeah, it is a bit like that when you're running a service-based company versus a product-based, right? So
correct.
You got to be conscious of time. Okay, so you're in your 4th, 5th year. I know for yourself, you also have a family, a little one. How are you finding that balance right now? What are some tips you can give to business owners in that same sort of shoes as yourself?
Yeah, I know we talk about it a lot because, similar age. But man, it's harder juggling family and a child than it is running a business. And then trying to do the two together is infinitely harder than what I imagined it to be. Fundamentally because maybe there's, to be completely frank, there's a lot of guilt for myself being a business owner, but also trying to be a father at the same time and being present. And I remember saying this last week, I was on a panel session and they asked me a very similar question. And I remember very vividly, my wife actually said to me, and this was when he was about 6 months in, he's 16 months now, so 10 months ago. She said, look, sometimes I feel like you're here, but you're not here. She called me out. She basically was like, well, just because you're physically here, she could see my mind was like drifting into other places.
Thinking about social
Just thinking about business, thinking about, I don't know, the mortgage, like the bill I'm going to pay, all sorts of things, right?
Yes.
And it struck me at the time, but after I marinated on a bit, I was like, damn, like I really actually need to do something about this. Because fundamentally, I think everyone's just trying to work it out. And even I talked to one of my mentors, like Vin Zhang. I've had many conversations with the guy, and he's got his baby who's just been born, Melody. Congratulations to him. But even when he was juggling Xander, his first child, he was saying to me, he was flying about 300 days of the year in the US.
Yeah, wow.
And his wife was taking care of his kid by herself, basically out, like besides that time. And a guy as successful as him, who's basically made it on paper, if you put it that way, still doesn't have it worked out. And so everything, there's a cost to it, right?
Yes.
Like there's a cost to your wife or your partners having to, sacrifice their time and their energy and their bandwidth or their careers to allow you to be able to do what you do as a business owner. And so for me, I have to understand that this is a privilege for me to be able to do this, that my wife even allows me to, because she'd be like,
she wears the pants.
She wears the pants, right? And she fundamentally facilitates my ability to do what I do here at Social Wave.
There's a lot of things that she probably has done, especially, and I think really it's the time that she's given up to allow you to do these things. And of course, it's going to benefit her too, but also without her, there is no you or Social Wave, really.
Yes.
When you think about it, and I think your wife and my wife are cut from the same cloth because she was the same. She was like, Phil, you're not here. You're not here. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm here.
Yeah.
Right? But it's really the fact that we'll go out, do X, Y, and Z, whatever it is we're doing, but I'm always on my phone or I'm visibly thinking about the business. And even now, sometimes when you get a bit anxious about a client, for whatever reason, maybe you stuffed it up or maybe they're expecting something today, but you couldn't do it. She knows that.
She can feel it, right?
She can feel the mood change. And I try to be conscious about it now and try and hide it to try and be present.
Yes.
But I can't help it, man. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, this is affecting my mood. And it's hard to balance it because also, you know, when there's shit going on within the business, that's going to affect you personally and it will affect the time that you spent with the wife or with your kid. And it's shit, man. Like it's hard for me to compartmentalize that stuff.
100%.
I don't know how you handle it, but...
I'm still working it out. I think that I definitely haven't cracked the code, if there is even a code to crack. It's one of those things where it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
And there are days where I feel like I've gone 10 steps backwards. And then there are days where I feel like I'm doing all right. Like we talked about, I just went to Bali for the first time since I started the business and had a real holiday. And there was a lot of guilt around, in this case, like not working on the business, right? So it's like you got your physical baby, your biological baby, and then you got your entrepreneurial baby, and you feel like the wheels are going to come off if you aren't attending to things there as well. And so there's this constant tug of war from both sides that you've got to deal with as well. And most of it is mental, right?
Yes.
Most of it's mental. Because I came back and, you know, Kel's behind the camera. So how did everything go? And everyone's like, yeah, it's fine. It's all running fine. Like, there's no problems, right? And so you cook up all these like nightmares in your head. And I think the thing just, you know, to round out being sort of like both a dad and a business owner is that I don't think it's something that you are supposed to get rid of. It doesn't go away. It's just something you have to learn to manage.
I think to that point there, it was probably your first time getting away from your entrepreneurial baby. And that's why you were kind of anxious and worried about it. But it's a testament to the hard work you've obviously put in.
I appreciate it.
Being able to not only just focus on the operations, but also to think about the bigger picture. Like the whole point of you opening this business is to become a business owner and that you're supposed to be working on the business year on year, growing, getting a team behind you so that you can do those things and get away from business.
100%.
And now you've got to a point where you can enjoy a holiday in Bali for 10 days and not worry about the business. So now booking your second holiday and not worry about these guys.
I'm already looking at it.
But yeah, that's a huge thing. Like I feel like, to your point as well, like I'm in my fifth year of running my business full time. And I was working 40, 60 hours a week. You didn't know any better but to work, right? To grow this business. But now I've got the little one. She's about 18, 19 months. I find myself doing about maybe 25, 30 hours a week. To me, to your point, it's like I've got this anxiety in me that I'm leaving my entrepreneurial baby alone and I need to nurture it. But I think it's also because there's a beast in me that goes, I want to keep killing. I want to keep taking it to the next level. But then if I keep feeding that inner emotion, I'm going to forget about my family. The baby. So this whole past year, I've been focused on being mentally present, being present so I can see my little one grow up, not get angry about X, Y, and Z or how work has affected my family life. I don't want that to happen. Yeah, this whole past year, it's just been a journey about finding myself, finding that balance, letting go of growing this business because it's gotten good to a point where I can actually, work the 30 hours. Go to the gym for myself, get a bit healthy. I mean, look, I don't have the six pack as well, but yes, you go into business having the right intentions of getting financial freedom, time, but then actually realizing, hey, you know what? If I keep going down that pathway, I'm never going to be satisfied. My kid's going to be a teenager and forget about me, and I've lost that, that 10 years. So as hard as it is, I am finding that balance.
Yeah, but we also have to remember that we are humans. Like I think about our parents and we're both children of migrants. Like my dad used to work, he's worked 7 days a week except for like Lunar New Year, which was the only time. It was the only time he took a day off, right? Yeah. Just to have a family dinner with everyone. He was back at work the next day. But did I ever resent my dad for not being around physically when I was a child? I didn't, because I fundamentally understood that was his role. He was here to bring bread.
Provide,
and to provide for the family as well. And so I think that, amongst all of the noise of that is social media, we don't have to be the dad that does everything and then still be really successful in business. It's quite uncommon, I guess, overall. And so I always have to anchor myself against what everyone else is achieving. I think we've achieved quite a lot and we're very humble. I think it's a privilege to be a business owner, especially now with cost of living and all the issues that we've got, the ability to be, but to the point of business, you start the business because you want lifestyle, you want freedom. And for me, true wealth and true freedom is the ability to choose what you do with your time when you want to do with your time as well.
When you want, how you want.
100%. So if you're going to start a business, and I've been a victim of this, is you chase the growth at all costs.
Always.
Right? And that's because I have the inner beast as well, just going, man, am I capable of this? And you just keep breaking through these ceilings that you think that you can't. And when you do, it's like a high. It's a bit of a drug, right? Like
it is.
Yeah.
You're addicted to that success.
You get really
right?
addicted to it. It's a dopamine hit. But at the end of the day, I think we hit a point, and we're on the same sort of timeline and pathway. It's like, I'm also at a stage now where I think about maybe it's time to rebalance the books a little bit.
Yeah.
And, prioritize health, prioritize quality of time, especially now that you've got a little one. These are all things I'm thinking about as well.
No, that's awesome. Now, just a little segue into not necessarily your business, but I feel like Level Asian podcast is kind of a business in itself
It
now.
is, yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? What was the reason behind creating that community or that podcast, which is now a community?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
The podcast was initially, I joke about this now, and I said this to a few people, was like, we used to have version 1 of Level Asian was this shit podcast, which was like a rip-off of like Guy Raz's like How I Built This. It was called How They Grew It. That's terrible. And it was like me and Davey, I think we intuitively wanted to learn more about business ourselves. And so I think we filmed about 5 or 6 episodes, very much like your podcast, understanding how other entrepreneurs were able to grow their business. And what we ended up realizing was, number 1, we didn't really enjoy it too much. And number 2 was 5 out of the 6 podcasts were all Asians. Yeah. And so we were like, well, why don't we just do a podcast that's more for us growing up, who wanted to see someone who was doing what we're doing but look like what we did. The genesis of it was like, well, let's make this pivot and let's see where it leads us. It was very exploratory. There was no business focus at it at all. And I think the first episode we got your namesake, Phil as well, Phil Liao. He's, Commonwealth Games, all that sort of stuff. He was a phenomenal first guest to kick the whole thing off, and that sort of lit it off. And, we're now like, 50, 60 episodes in, been doing it for 2 years, and it's crazy. Like, it's actually insane how much growth we've had and what it's been doing. So, and whilst there's no business focus, it has led to business benefits as a result for Social Wave, just through network, opening up doors. I mean, some guests have become clients, all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, in the space of 2 years, I think it's grown from, obviously 0 followers to probably close to 100,000.
Yeah, combined, I'd say.
I mean, for you guys just to start off with an idea to where you guys are now, that's amazing, right? So well done. And the events that you guys have held have been pretty great as well. And I think the content that you guys put out probably resonates with a lot of Asian households because we all grew up pretty much the same, but no one really talks about it and brings it to light.
Yeah.
So the fact that you guys have been able to shine a light on it has made me, and I'm sure other Asian Australians, feel very comfortable in our own skin and made us feel like, hey, these guys are one of us, right?
Yeah.
And doing something good for our community.
Well,
which is good.
if you look at content now, content is all about relatability now. I think we just got lucky at the time we started doing it, that was where everything was shifting towards, because it used to be about like, education, I'll teach you this and that. But then it became like hey, this is what I'm going through. And there are other people who are also going through the same thing. And we're like sharing these sort of stories with each other as well and learning off each other, but also just like making it normal, because a lot of people just sort of get stuck in their own heads and like, well, I'm the only one who's going through this, when now you've got like, 50 or 60 other people who we've interviewed who also go through the same thing as well. And so that's created, like, galvanized the community. I wouldn't say we've got a perfect scenario where a community like that we can call, I mean, I'm proud of it, but it's more like, hey, we can do more. Like there's a lot more that we can do with it. And I think that the other thing to say about this is like, it wasn't just me, it was a whole team of people who were behind it, including the team on Social Wave who sort of create the content, but everyone's incredibly passionate about it. But I think the secret sauce, I was talking about this with the team, was like the secret sauce behind this is just the ability to make people feel like they're heard, that you can relate. And I think, like, for example, even your podcast, people who are maybe sitting on the fence, who were maybe like me in the 20s, who really wanted to make that jump but didn't know how, this is the stuff that they really, really want. So you have to make it relatable, but you also have to make it achievable as well, to be able to do that. And so that's how we've sort of bridged that gap, and that's why it's so successful.
That's awesome. That's thanks for sharing that. Now, I guess, you're doing all this. You've created a really, I'd say, successful business, podcast as well. What's next for Kan?
I think the limitation around, if we talk about professional services and scalability, I'm a scale guy. It's either go big or go home, right? And scaling service-based business is very, very difficult, incredibly difficult. You got to scale expertise, knowledge, people. You got to scale clients in that situation, and you got to scale results. And when you're dealing with, a situation like in marketing where things are moving at such a pace now, it's very, very difficult to try and get all those pieces together. So what we are potentially looking into at the moment is really around productized services. And what I mean by that is we are going to unpack all the stuff that we know to turn it into something that can be easily digested. Now, that could be in the form of online courses, paid communities, consulting. It could be group coaching. Like, these are sort of the areas we're going to. One of the things that we really actually want to get into is, given my experience and my team's expertise in podcasting, we believe that doing podcasts for clients like you and many others, we know what works and what doesn't work. And so we want to distill that down into basically packaged up in a way that everyone can consume it and learn what took us 5 years to figure out into something quite small. And so that allows us to infinitely impact more people and scale. But as a business, it also means commercially it's probably better margins. And, you know, of course, we want to make more money as well. But it's a win-win-win for everyone, I guess, in this case. So that's the next project we're looking at, basically.
Yeah, I guess the next step for those service-based businesses is looking at how to productize your service, which sounds like you guys are doing now. So it means that you can, you know, be hands-off and
100%.
You can basically reach, or it's a one-to-many type.
The tipping point at that point when I I always wanted to go into productise, but was when I saw this case study. I think the YouTube channel is called Starter Story. They interviewed this guy called, I forget his name. He's Brett something. Anyway, he runs a company called Design Joy. And he was a graphic designer that was doing $2 million by himself. Insanity, because I think his margins were sitting around about 60, 70% as well.
Pretty good.
Yeah, for a service professional. But that's because he productized himself. So I think it was like you would pay a subscription, just like you do for software. You get unlimited amount of designs, but you can only do one design at a time. And he would just get the work done. It's very hands-off, not a lot of hand-holding with clients. And I think most of his clients were like tech firms who just needed a lot of outsourced design.
Yep.
And so when I saw that, I was like, holy crap, like this is actually ridiculous as a business model. And then I started exploring more and talking to Vin, for example, who sells an online course that teaches you about communication. Without going to the numbers, he's doing huge numbers. He's doing 7 to 8 figures, I'm pretty sure, just with one course alone. So it's insane to see that. And then, you know, but I do believe in like these sort of like ladders of wealth in business where you start off with like just trading time for money. Yes. And then you move into sort of trading other people's time for money. So you leverage your staff's time. This sounds terrible, Kels, by the way.
Fuck your ears.
Yeah, and you know, there's a gap and there's a margin there.
Yeah.
And then after that, you move into either product-based or you move into something that's a little bit more scalable, right? And so I'm at that stage where I'm probably in that second ladder. The third ladder is then moving into productization of knowledge. And then how do you package it up, especially now with the internet, into a way that people can consume and still get the benefit out of it without you having to like scale your team size as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the thing with the audience, I mean, with marketing, you can basically target everyone.
Correct.
So yeah, I mean, look, last question before we end this. We spoke about the next steps for the business, but you make all this money, Kan. What's next for you and the family and you personally?
That 1 year traveling was not enough.
Yeah.
And it was cut short. So I feel like it was a little bit I didn't sort of exit on my own terms, right? And now having just done 3 weeks in Bali, it's sort of like reignited, that passion. I've always been a lifestyle guy, and I think just getting sucked up in business over the last 4 or 5 years have sort of like lost that a little bit, but I think it was necessary to build it. But I think the next steps now is really just looking at creating more flexibility and more freedom in what I do. And one of those things is just having the ability to travel longer for larger portions of the year. And so, you know, on the horizon, I guess from a lifestyle perspective is just being able to maybe 3 or 4 years, you know, a third or a quarter of the year, being able to spend somewhere overseas. Yep. I'm a slow traveler. I don't go in there and just hit all the tourist sites and I'm out and back. I like to have one base and then live there like a local. So the hope is to be able to do that and been entertaining the idea with the wife about, I don't know, buying a condo in Bangkok or something like that, and just so chilling out there for a few years and then Airbnb for the rest. But yeah, that's the master plan. We still got to do something about
it. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, I guess you better get that product ASAP. Yeah, get it
exactly.
Out, right?
Yeah.
No, awesome. Thanks for sharing and coming on the podcast today. That was very insightful. I'm pretty sure there's going to be someone in the audience that can relate to your journey, and hopefully they can start their own. So thanks, Kan.
No, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man.
Cheers, man.
So if you're about to begin your business journey or you're currently going through your business journey, tune into future episodes so that you can learn more and find a supportive community. Otherwise, follow me on LinkedIn for more.